Again, according to Manetho, he talks about how they came in and enslaved people. And eventually, when they were driven out, by, you have Sekenen Retao, that's Heru Sekenen Retao. You have Yamos, you have Kamos. So Sekenen Retao came first, then Kamos, and then Yamos in that order. That once they were driven out, again, according to Manetho, they went on to found a place called Jerusalem, right? Now, a lot of you have heard of that place called Jerusalem, but it gives you a different historical thing, not, the fairy tales that you get in the Bible, but an actual historical context of documents that were written at the time that said they came as invaders and eventually they were driven out and then they went on to found a place called Jerusalem. Now, that's different from the story that they told that, let my people go, Pharaoh was enslaving us, and then we went, to Jerusalem. So, basically what you have is this spin story that they gave that's not consistent with the archaeological evidence and the actual historical documents that were written at the time that it happened, that it wasn't an exodus, it was an expulsion. They were driven out of the land of black people, and then that's where they went on to, Jerusalem. So again, to come down,
down to how we
right. So now you have the Hyksos, the Hekau Hasut, they were driven out. The Persians came in, they were driven out by, the rulers from the south, also, black rulers. And then eventually you have the Assyrians who came in, right? So these are those who are associated with now modern-day Syria, that area. The Persians are associated with the Anatolian Peninsula. That's what you have modern-day Turkey, like that area. And then eventually you have Alexander the Greek who came in. So, this is coming out of Macedonia. That's like the eastern side of the Hellenic lands. So he was
Alexandria.
Right. No, Alexandria is different. Alexandria is after he conquered Kemet, then he decided to name a city that's right there on the Mediterranean Sea, Alexandria, after himself, right?
Okay.
But this is Alexander, the one who came in. So now you're talking about, Kemet, even again at the low dates, 3,400 BCE, before the Common Era. Now we're talking about 332 BCE. So you've gone over 3,000 years of history of keeping them out. But, what's interesting is that after Jehuti-Mes, Tutmos III is what he's called, that's when you start to see an infusion of these Amu who are coming in, who are brought in as princes. The idea is that once you conquer those people, and, interestingly, he was such a military commander that the word Armageddon came from one of his military campaigns. There was a place called Megiddo, and it was said that he smoked them so completely that it looked like, what they now refer to as Armageddon. So Al-Megiddo is what it was called. So he just destroyed so many of these places. But what he decided to do was something that we still do, which is that, if you defeat someone, you bring in their sons, and then you train them at your royal court. So now when they're finally installed as a ruler, they're going to do your bidding for you. But this ultimately backfired in the sense that they were still loyal to their own people, which is the Amu, these foreigners. You had, for example, and again, this is coming into the battles and the wars that were fought. You had the invasion of what were referred to as the Sea People, right? These people of obscure origin who, destroyed the Hittites, destroyed other civilizations that were seen as being on par with Kemet, but they weren't able to do so because you had Ramesu, Mary Amun, who they call Ramesses III. You had Meron Patal. You had rulers like that who were able to drive them out. They actually document how they did so in terms of maritime warfare, right? So forth and so on. So those who are interested can look more into that. But again, you had all these victories in terms of keeping them out, but eventually Persians, Assyrians, the Greeks came in. And if you read a book called Stolen Legacy by Nana George D.M. James, he actually goes into how Thales, for example, the lawgiver, this is talking about now the Greeks. So if you ever read classics at University of Ghana, you'll start reading about Pythagoras, right? You have the Pythagoras theorem, Exactly. Why is it called that? When he actually learned it in Kemet. So all of these philosophers who you've heard of, all of them studied in Kemet, right? The Greek. Very good. Very good. And Aristotle, not only, so he was one of the teachers of Alexander. And once Alexander came in and conquered Kemet, a lot of those books were now ascribed to Aristotle.
So I want us to go back again. By the time of Alexandria, the place was called Egypt. I want to get a real timeline when it felt like, okay, this is when Kemet is now shifting into the hands of what? Greek people?
Yeah, that's 332 BCE. So this is after 3,000 years of history. So the Greeks come into the historical scene basically at the end of history, because if you look at writing going back 5,400 BCE.
Yeah.
And now, 3,400 BCE, that's like 5,400 years ago, right? That means the majority of writing took place on the other side of BCE.
Yeah.
We're only at 2024 on this side of CE now.
Yeah.
So that means that the majority of writing had taken place already, and most people are starting, off with Greek, right? Yeah. That's a classics department. Literally, if you want to learn classics, you start off with Greek.
So what I wanted to know is the period of the Greek. Is it the same period? That is Alexandria is the sort of like the representation of the Greek now. So
around 2,300 years ago, thereabout.
Yeah.
As opposed to 5,400 years ago.
So now Alexandria and the Greeks have taken over Egypt now. They've taken over Kemet now, and Kemet is now changing hands to become Egypt. Okay. All right.
And even so, Egypt. This is now we're using the English language. Is coming because of their heavy reliance on Greek, right? So the Greeks, and then the Greeks were defeated by the Romans, right? So you're talking about somewhere around 32 BCE thereabout. So now the Romans are the ones who are teaching the British. So the Romans actually invaded the British Isles, and they're the ones who taught them how to read and write. They're the ones who taught them the Latin script that we're using right now. If you look at the letter Z, O, H, that's the Latin script. So literally, the knowledge of the Greeks was passed on to the Romans by force. And then the Romans passed on their knowledge to, the British. So, and that's the reason why you're using Egypt to this day, is because it's coming through a specific lineage.
Okay. Yep. So Romans also came in. So the story that you read in the Bible about Romans and the Constantine and all that, spending some time in Egypt, for 400 years and all that. What's your take on that? Because I want to understand whether it is just a story that has been taken and not real, or...
So Constantine isn't the one who was supposedly staying for 400 years. That's referring to what the Hyksos said after they were driven out and founded Jerusalem. They decided to find a story that they could use in order to basically not say that they were, killers and conquerors and so forth who left with their tails between their legs. They were destroyed, they were defeated, and they were driven out of the land of black people, right? Now, they're not telling that story to their children. What they're saying is that they were enslaved, and then, their Elohim came and saved them, and then, put them in this place that's now the land of Judea. Right, and again, that's Manetho who's saying that after these Hyksos were driven out, they went into the land of Judea and they founded the place called Jerusalem. So that's now a historical document. But again, all of the historical documents are very clear that they were invaders, that they were rapists, they were pillagers, they were plunderers, they were enslavers, and they were driven out by the Kemetyu, that's to say the black people. Only their document, which is an imaginary document, the mythical document, where they talk about burning bushes that are talking to them and all types of just ridiculous things. Those aren't historical documents, but what they're doing is they're doing a type of historical revisionism. Yeah. It's trying to use basically soft power in order to say, we weren't the murderers that we actually were. Yeah. We were victimized, but then we were saved, and now we have Jerusalem. You understand? Okay. So that's the difference between the actual historical documentation and then what they say about it. So the 400 years and all of that, that's referring to the imaginary story of so-called Israelites. But they weren't there for 400 years. If you look at the period of the Hyksos, this is what is referred to as a second intermediate period, where they, were able to get a foothold in Lower Kemet. Now, interestingly, they actually came in very peacefully. So around the time of Amenemhat and Senwosret, you have a mural that shows them coming in, and it shows them, they have animals that come in with their wives and so forth. And interestingly, that's around the time of the story of Sanhat. And the story of Sanhat is about a person from Kemet who goes into southwestern Eurasia, and he is, brought in by the people, so forth and so on. But eventually he realizes that those aren't his people. He needs to come back to the land of black people. And actually that's what Senwosret, Nesubiti Senwosret says to him. He says, Il Kur An Kemet, which is make your return to Kemet. Ir Kur An Ut Kemet, which is, again, literally make your return to the land of black people. Very, very important point, because literally that's telling you that, you're not at home amongst those non-blacks. Yeah. You need to come back to the land of black people.
Yeah. So somebody will be listening to us now and thinking, these guys are talking a lot about Kemet.
Mm-hmm.
What is the importance of Kemet now to us in this time, in this modern world now that people are, moving on and
Mm-hmm.
inventing things and trying to go to space and moon and, a lot of countries are developing and these two Africans are sitting down here talking about Kemet.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Kemet relevant to us now?
The most important thing about Kemet is its name. I'll come again. The most important thing about Kemet is its name, because as black people are named, that's our constitution. So we're not sitting down writing Article 1, Article 2, Amendment this. Literally, the name tells you everything, and that's on an individual level.
Okay.
So if my name is Obadele, it's telling me how I'm supposed to behave. That's on an individual level. But then also the name of your nation is telling you something. So because the name is Land of Black People, that is how you understand why they're driving out the Hyksos. Like if you just called it Africa, then hey, anyone can come in, right? And that's what's happening right now. But once you call it Land of Black People, then you see why ruler after ruler is taking steps to keep non-blacks out, and then also taking steps in order to incorporate more black people and more lands of black people. Most people think about quote unquote ancient Egypt, and they think the most important thing is about the glory, right? Because white people say it's important, so therefore we say it's important. Oh, they had big pyramids. Oh, they had gold, and they say, and you have even people talking about this golden age and so forth. The most important thing about Kemet is not any of those things, because all of those things are based on the fact that we maintain this as a land of Maat, a land of black people. You understand?
Talking about that, I don't want to cut you short.
But you are cutting me short. But go ahead.
We'll come back to it again.
Yeah.
But
really quick, let me just land on this point.
Okay, yeah.
To your point,
Yeah.
because I think this is the most important point for people to really understand.
Yes.
And if they get nothing else out of this interview than this, the most important thing about Kemet is its name. And if we're coming to how is it relevant right now, once you actually read the primary source text, it tells you how we need to operate on this land that we're now calling Africa, and we need to once again make it Kemet. We need to once again make this a land that is ruled by black people so that Maat can return to her seat. Maat referring to truth, justice, all of those types of things, but deeper than any of those concepts that you have in English. So once you read the primary source text, then you'll know, well, hold on. In Kemet, they built walls to keep the Amu out. Nowadays, the Amu are running Osu, right? We're in Osu right now, and you can't go into a store without the Lebanese. The exact same people who are fighting to keep out are now in here, and they're running the whole show. You have them in Eastern Congo taking out the coltan. You find them in Umzansi, what they now call South Africa, taking out the platinum and the diamonds. You find them in Sierra Leone and Liberia taking out the diamonds. You find them taking the uranium out of northwestern Niger. If we actually operated as we used to for the majority of the history of Kemet, that tells us how we need to be operating right now. So again, the name itself tells you how you're supposed to operate. There's a proverb in Kiswahili that says, "Ukirithi jina, rithi na mambo yake," and it translates to, "He who inherits the name adopts its affairs." This means that once you have a certain type of name, it will make you comport yourself in a particular type of way, either in a way that, will bring you up. And that's the reason why names are so important to us as black people, because the name, if someone calls you, Obadele, let me give myself an example. Literally, it translates to the king arrives at the house. Okay. Now, imagine you have that name. Every time you hear that name, it's telling you what your destiny is supposed to be. It defines you. It directs you. It tells you everything about who you are. Yeah. And that's the same thing about Kemet. That's the reason why all of these white Egyptologists and their, so-called black lackeys are doing the exact same thing. They're trying to say, no, it's Egypt. Let's just say ancient Egypt. Or, y'all are just Egyptomaniacs and so forth. Because they don't want you to know that the most relevant thing is that go to the primary text and see that not only did they call it Kemet, how did they act on the basis of it being Kemet? They always brought in more black people and they kept out the non-black people. And that's the major lesson that we need to have moving forward right now.
Boom, 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 boom. I was going to cut him short.
I'm glad you didn't.
I did. And then he took me back again, and then I allowed it. Okay, anyway, what was the worship system in Kemet? Because when you read about Egypt, my small little history that I did about Egypt, it was all related to Greek gods. Greek gods. So Kemet, before Greeks taking over, how did we worship?
So this is a good question. I would like us to look at the terminology that we're using.
Okay.
And right. and there's a reason for this. Because our worldview, where it comes to what we refer to as spirituality, is really based on a Christianity, Islam type of worldview, where it's like your purpose of being here is to go to church and praise Him. You have all these songs of praise and so forth. Like that's your reason for being, is to praise the one who died for you because you had sins, because a woman ate of a forbidden fruit. It's like a bunch of just ridiculousness. However, if you actually understand yourself as a black person, you understand that your purpose for being in this world is for you to fulfill what we refer to in Twi as your nkrabia, right? So your nkrabia is, in English, they would say that's your destiny.
Yes.
That's your reason for being.
Yeah.
So now everything, every entity that you come across is there in order to assist you in reaching your destiny. You can think of it like your destination, right?
Yeah.
So again, if you look at our worldview is around living Maat. That means on a cosmic level,
so people
you have
who don't
Maat.
know living Maat.
That's what I'm about to break it down. So you can think about Maat on the level of cosmic. This means that everything is in its proper place. If you look at where the stars are, how the sun rises in a certain place at a specific time of the year, we just had the solstice, the equinoxes. Everything being in alignment on a cosmic level is one level of Maat. And I'm quoting Nana Theophile Obenga, who breaks it down. Theophile Obenga. Exactly. And then so that's on the cosmic level, that's the highest level. But now you have on the socio-political level, and it's the role of the ruler in order to make sure that same type of order exists on the human plane and the socio-political plane. This means that things are out of order. If the Hyksos come in, for example, it's his role to drive them out so that Maat can once again be in place. Anytime you have, a breakdown in social order, so forth, it's the role of the ruler to make sure that Maat is there. You understand? That's now on the socio-political level. But now on the individual level, it's in terms of my living in accordance with Maat. So that's where the 42 declarations come in. Whereas, things along the lines of, I have not stolen, right? I have not, slept with a man's wife. I have not, cursed the ruler. I have not done. So all of those types of things.
These are all 42 laws of...
The 42, what I often refer to as declarations of innocence. This means that after you pass on, you go into the hall of the two Maats. Maati is referred to, and there you're judged.
Audience, we are still linking this to Kemet.
Yes.
That was
so all of this is
Maat,
exactly. So all of this is referring to Kemet, and we're coming, directly to your question, because on an individual level, when you're talking about worship, that's for the Greco-Romans and so forth. They just praise these imaginary creatures, whereas for us, we have all of these entities, whether it's you, Zozo, if you assist me in achieving my, that is part of my path, right? My life's path. If, for example, if Tano, for example, if the Necha named Osset, if the Necheret called Osset, or the Necha called Usir assists me in my life's path, then it's about reciprocity. The same way that these entities assist me, then I make propitiation. So it's not about worshiping them. It's literally reciprocity, that if you assist me in achieving my life's path, where I can eventually become Usir, then I will also make this offering to you and so forth. So it's not, let me worship you. That's the Greco-Roman Christian thing. It's that let's have reciprocity, because my reason for being here is not to worship. My reason for being is to attain my destiny, to live an ethical and moral life, to have good character, to eventually become an ancestor. This is why if you look at various murals in classical Kemet, you see the rulers who are pouring libation, right? They're pouring libation because eventually they themselves want to have libation poured for them. Because if you have an ethical and moral life, if you have good character, then you will eventually become an ancestor yourself. So that's our purpose for being, is not to worship. It's actually to become an ancestor. So you find that in classical Kemet. You still find that in contemporary Kemet to this day.
I think I was probably even trying to put a question more around, how in modern Africa now, or modern Ghana, we talk about deities.
Right.
And when we talk about deities, everybody says, it's Satan worship. So I wanted to know whether even, during the Kemetic period, we had deities that we worship. That is where I think my brain was actually going to, that we had, because seeing the gods that get mentioned a lot in the Greek mythology tells me that, that means that Kemet might have a lot of deities or smaller gods. That is where my question was trying to be based on.
So I hope I was clear in that. So if you look at, let's say, for example, Asiutano, like Asiutano, this is like an embodiment of the river, right? So the river, let's say this is a river that you go to drink water every day, and it's literally keeping you alive. So if you see your own life as being sacred, then you also see that which assists you in achieving your destiny is, sacred as well. And when we see that sacredness inside of the bodies of water, inside of the earth, inside of all these entities that exist around us, that means that we show reciprocity. This means that the same way that I took water from you so that I could live, then I may, put down an offering of fruit. I may make an offering of, libation of palm wine. I may, you see what I'm saying?
I see what you mean.
So what they're saying, oh, this is worship, is actually showing a deep understanding of reciprocity. I know that this is what sustains my life so that I can achieve my life's mission. So therefore, I need to also give something back. When, quote unquote, white people see it, they say, oh, they're worshiping a river, right? It means that they don't understand this, deep philosophical concept that I'm bringing to you. And it's the same thing in classical Kemet, that, for example, Ichuru Hapi is personified, right? So here you have the river, what they call the river now, is personified. And literally everybody's life is dependent on this river. So now what do you do if you actually understand reciprocity? Now, because, quote unquote, white people don't understand reciprocity, they'll just take the river, they'll pollute it, they'll put chemicals in, they'll destroy it. They don't care, right? And you who will maintain that river, make sure that the water is drinkable for millions of years, all the way up to the time that they come. But as soon as we lose that concept of reciprocity, now you look at Asiupra. Look at any of these rivers where there's galamsey going on. It means that understanding has been replaced by a worship understanding. And it's, oh, well, I shouldn't worship the river. Now I should worship an imaginary white man on a stick, or Bruni Chinchinga. And that's what we're dealing with to this day. So basically what I'm saying is even the concept of worship is foreign to us. We need to get rid of that and really understand what reciprocity is about. If we understand that our purpose for being is to achieve our destiny, if we understand that we are to have good character and live moral and ethical lives, to have children, all of these things in order to live. Now we start looking at all of those aspects of reality that assist us in that, and then we show reciprocity to them, whether that's a human being, whether that's a river, whether that's a tree. So if Zozo, you've done something to help me sustain my life, and you've done so with this pito, imagine that you come to my house and I don't offer you anything. Is that showing reciprocity?
No, it's not.
Or if I offer you something, am I worshiping you?
Oh, no.
That's exactly. That's not even the concept. For us as black people, we say, if you do something, you say, that if the left washes the right, then the right should also wash the left. That's our understanding of what they refer to as quote unquote worship. If you assist me in my life, in my life's journey, then me too, I should show reciprocity through an embodied act, through what they call ritual drama, by actually acting out this reciprocity in some way, shape, or form. That may take the form of libation, that may take the form of offering. I can put fruit by the river, I could do any of those things, but it's really just to show that reciprocity.
Let's go to Kemet again. I hear about temples, and I hear about temples in Kemet. One, what are temples, and what are the temples in Kemet? And were the temples also broken, or what's the story about temples in Kemet? So
what you're referring to in classical Kemet, in the language itself, will be referred to as Hut.
I hear you saying, you're not saying Kemet alone, you're saying classical Kemet.
Yeah.
And I want you to, explain that. Why do you call it classical Kemet?
So when I say classical Kemet, I'm putting you in a certain time period, right? What people would call ancient, right? But classical is a term that's a bit better than ancient, in the sense that something that's classical is seen as having a certain level of refinement and, heights of achievement, things of that nature. So when I say classical Kemet, and that's because there's also a contemporary Kemet, that as soon as we understand what Kemet means, that it means the land of black people, right now we're living in contemporary Kemet. We're not operating like it's Kemet because anyone can come in and take our land and take our resources and steal the people. So it's so that you know that when I'm referring to Kemet, I'm talking about, classical Kemet, because there's also a contemporary Kemet. Even if you want to say ancient Egypt, that's because there's a modern Egypt, which is that country that's been overrun by the Arabs. So in the same sense, there's a modern Egypt, then there was an ancient Egypt. That's in that. But if we're using our own terminology, then we can refer to as classical Kemet. And this place that we're calling Ghana is also a land of black people. The lands that we're calling Cote d'Ivoire is also a land of black people. The land that we're calling Mali, all these Berlin Conference fragments should properly be referred to as what we would say in Tri Abibimang. If we're speaking P, we don't have a problem because we're already saying Kemet every time we say Abibimai. If we're speaking Yoruba, we don't have a problem because every time we say Ile Adulawo, we're saying the exact same thing as Kemet. Even if we were speaking Greek and we say Ethiopia.
Zoe TV Talking Points. Do not change the dial. Stay tuned.